Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Relatorium seminar. I'm very happy to be hosting my friend Bartek from Poland and his collaborator Jarek Chudziak. Did I pronounce the name correctly, Jarek?
Perfect. That was perfect.
Thank you. But before we get started, I do want to point out to our audience that on our YouTube Relatorium channel, they can now find the videos from our the special session we hosted at JMM. So we're very happy to share that with our audience. But without further ado, Jarek and Bartok, please take it away.
All right. Could you tell us how many minutes we've got? We should.
Right. Well, typically we shoot for the whole thing to be about an hour, maybe a little over, an hour and 15 minutes or so. So usually we say maybe like 45 minutes for the talk and then a conversation, but then we could keep it fluid as appropriate. If you want to involve audience members earlier, we're happy to do that too.
Perfectly. Perfectly. I think that we need around, let's say, 40 minutes, not more. I hope maybe 35 and then. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be here and really want to say still again, thanks a lot for Ted to bring me here, me and Jarek. We'll be talking about virtue, vice, and Socratic irony, and especially about benevolent LLMs and tools for moral enhancement. I've got the PDF here, and Jarek would be asking me to changing the slides, and that would be our method of conducting. All right. Has he fallen asleep, this student? Let's assume that it is on your lecture on or exercise. Has he fallen asleep or not? What do you think?
It sure looks like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've got with your school that kind of situations, but me as a teacher at the university, I've got many times I've met that my students were, they closed their eyes, and I was wondering. That is the question, and we could answer that question in many ways. We could imagine that, and one way is that he is sleeping, but another teacher could say, no, he's not sleeping. He's closing his eyes to concentrate during the lecture. And this difference between those two is the main difference the main difference that we just want to work with. Our observation is that the benevolent interpretation is maybe not about this about not interpretation, but benevolence as such, defined by Aristotle, requires recognizing and promoting another person's good for their own sake. And benevolent interpretation would be that he is not sleeping at now. Yes, he is concentrating much better than with open eyes. And our aim is to explore whether and how LLMs could embody Aristotelian benevolence, and not only benevolence, but especially benevolence, despite not being moral agents, of course, in the human sense. And the vision of the main talk is that LLMs can be designed to support users' moral development by simulating both benevolent and also malevolent agents in dynamic interactions. And that would be the benevolent interpretation. He has not fallen asleep. He is merely closing his eyes, as I said, in order to concentrate more deeply. And this interpretation remains, of course, benevolent until empirical evidence becomes decisive. For example, until he starts snoring. Yeah? Then it wouldn't be possible. But malevolent interpretation is that he has fallen asleep. He is disengaged from the lesson or lecture or exercise. He is bored and lacks any natural curiosity for the subject. And that's good, the malevolent agent would say. Let him rest. Yeah, he will have more strength later, and the less he knows, maybe the better, even. All right, that was only an example. Our outline is that I will say a bit about Aristotle on benevolence, and then I will try to connect benevolence and LLMs, and Jarek would say something about architectures, LLM architectures, and then some maybe ethical implementation of the Aristotelian approach.
Bartek, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just if you could answer, or maybe at least later maybe address it. I wonder if it makes a difference in the determination between benevolent and malevolent, whether you're seeing it from the perspective, or from whose perspective you're seeing it. In other words, is it that me as the teacher, for example, in the malevolent case, in the second case, I see that it's not serving my purpose, but it may well be serving his purpose. Because he needs to rest.
Yeah.
So it's fine for him
Yeah.
to rest, but it's actually against my interest. As opposed to in the benevolent case, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. Is that the situation? Because malevolent could also imply that I'm sort of, in some sense, against him, right? Like I'm sort of, right, that I'm interpreting it in a way that will end up hurting him, that I will in fact end up waking him up because you see, I mean, the way that you described the malevolent version made me think that the distinction you're drawing is a little bit finer than what was immediately obvious in my mind.
Yeah, that was only an example, and I was not so strict with this example. Nevertheless, I assume, just let's say for our talk, that there is something like a good of some person. And this goodness, let's say, of the person is a kind of objective state of affairs, let's say, that could be defined within the virtue ethics and is defined by Aristotle. And is a kind of, let's say, flourishing in terms of virtue ethics and Aristotle is a goodness. And then the perspective somehow doesn't matter in that sense. The only thing is that, for example, me as a teacher, if I've got the possibility to recognize adequately the true goodness of that person or not, and the same is with this person. If he or she can really adequately recognize his or her own goodness. Yes, that would be my first, let's say, my first answer.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that helps a lot in that. In
Yeah.
other words, the context here for the presentation, for your setup, is that there exists an objective
Yeah.
goodness for each person,
Yeah.
an assignment of goodness to each person, that, or a function, I guess.
Yeah.
Mapping of states of the world into a goodness.
Yeah.
That is objective, but the question is, and knowable, presumably, but whether you know it or not, and to what extent you know it, that is the variable.
Yeah.
Of interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will try to we will try to show also that this goodness could be defined in terms of virtues. Yes, and that is the Aristotelian idea. And benevolence is wishing the good for the sake of the other. Yeah, and this is the good that we are talking about. Yes, and benevolence is not about being nice or smiling. Yes, someone could be benevolent and not really kind in that sense that we are talking here. And it means wishing others well for their own sake. And for example, this teacher can be also not so kind, but if that would be the case, that be concentrating and not sleeping during the lecture is better for is a real goodness of this person, then even it not require, let's say, to be really kind. or smiling. All right. It is foundation of, for example, for Aristotle, of friendship and a key to trust, as it clarifies good intentions. Yes? If someone is benevolent to me, then the intentions are clear somehow. And of course, if we are talking about the friendship, then we need to have two-directional benevolence. Yes, this is the fundamental base, but it's not this two-directed benevolence is not the whole of friendship, but this is one necessary condition. All right. One can, of course, be benevolent towards strangers, not only to friends and to family members. Yes. Benevolence tends to spread. People often respond in kind. The key condition is here recognizing the other's good. That is the main thing. And the question is how we are at now, how people, let's say, interact with LLMs. We pose questions, we test some scenarios, we express some doubts and preferences. We could also evaluate LLM's responses and offer feedback. And all of that, what we are doing at now with LLMs, I've got all of the details here, leads to the phenomenon known as the reverse Turing test somehow. The LLM mirrors the user style of thinking and speaking. We may call this a reverse moral test. And as a kind of a results, LLMs can gradually adapt to the user moral profile, and that is the case in many conversations. And this enables the LLMs to approximate and promote the user's Aristotelian good. If LLMs are aware of the user's profile, then by applying the principles of Nicomachean ethics, this Aristotelian ethics, they may come to understand what constitutes that user eudaimonia. What does it mean to flourish for that user? And then this is the exercise. I'm conducting that exercise during my lectures with my students. What does your LLM know about you? The Big Five is one of the best known ways of describing personality. And this is some kind of a measure of personality. And it captures 5 broad dimensions of how people tend to think, feel, and behave. Openness, conscientiousness, sorry for my pronunciation, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And then I could, for example, test my personality. This is kind of a measure. I could, I could have some special test, and psychologists are doing that, are conducting that kind of a test. And let's say that I didn't conduct that kind of a test. I didn't fulfill anything. And let's say that I use a memory, the function memory in language models like, let's say, GPT or Gemini. Yes, because this is an option. You could use it or not. And then ask the question, based on the availability memory of our conversation, describe my personality in detail using the Big Five model, because this is a concrete and well-known, well-established model, and openness and extraversion and etc. And I think let's try it if you like it, and you may be surprised by what the LLM knows about you. Really, I was really surprised what my LLMs knows about me. Because I'm using the memory option. If you do not use the memory option, then the results wouldn't be so surprising. All right. In my case, the model identified my personality almost flawlessly and in great detail. And that was the case. All right. And then, Jarek, it's your turn.
Okay, so we will go now through a couple more slides, which will be a little bit more, probably less philosophical. I will give you a little bit more flavor what we are doing from the kind of computational point of view, right? Especially from what is possible from computer science, I would say, and engineering, I would say, point of view, because we have some platforms, we have some ideas, we have some cooperations with Bartek and other guys from social science, so we can build a little bit more sophisticated, I would say, solution than something what Bartek just mentioned, right? Because we are not talking about the LLMs or kind of agents as you are using them, using ChatGPT or cloud or whatever, right? We are using a little bit more complex cognitive architecture. So in there, probably you know about them, but I will recap them very quickly. We are calling something, we are using something what is called the agent. And an agent is kind of the combination of different things, right? It's combination of the classical LLM and this icon representing mind you can treat this as a LLM in the sense what just Bart mentioned. But then you can kind of equip this mind with some additional, as we call them, tools, but you can also call them skills or whatever. So you can add perception, and this is something what is on the top. So different skills, I would say, like the visual perception or just reading perception or whatever sensor you would like to add. Then you can equip with something what will be very interesting for us is the brain, right? So you can equip with different kind of memories, the short-term, long-term knowledge. So everything what we discussed for the last 50 or 40 years in the area of AI, cognitive science, computational psychology, or whatever. And then the agents, of course, they can act. Yeah, they can generate text, tools, whatever. So this is kind of the stuff which already happened. And by the way, when you talk to ChatGPT, you have agents on. You don't know even that it's not single LLM. There are a couple agents there on the back. Can you go to the next one, Bartek, please? Okay, so just going a little bit towards the psychology or philosophy. Yeah, so what we can try to emulate or simulate or synthesize, we can put the agents, I would say, in very much, I would say, social kind of ecosystem, right? In this social ecosystem, they can meet other agents, or they can meet humans, and they can accumulate different knowledge about what just happened, but also about the emotions, right? They can decode a little bit the emotions. Yeah, so you can have the episodic memory, narrative memories. The agent in the same time can use the local knowledge, or if they don't know something, they can check something on the web or whatever, and they can also make some planning, right? And not only in terms of moving somewhere, but also in terms of the argumentation or dialogue or debate or whatever. And in the more advanced approaches, they can even simulate, I would say, the kind of using kind of the counterfactual skills, so that they can simulate, I would say, different scenarios for the discussion. Next, please. And yeah, and then I will not go into details, probably I will leave it for discussion. You can, of course, use the single agent, you can have a multi-agent stuff, you can have
Jarek, can I ask a quick question? So in the environment from the previous slide that you were sort of envisioning, are these agents in some sense primed to be different? They're prepared in a different way.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine a situation to this social environment ecosystem that you said, where it could be just AI agents, no humans, for example, and they're just kind of evolving and interacting with one another. And perhaps there could be some humans, but they don't need to necessarily declare themselves as such. Or is that like they could just learn from one another in some way?
Yeah. I mean, they can adapt to the situation. This is, by the way, what we are doing. So thanks for this question. Okay. So if you are interested, you can go to the archive and check some papers of my students and myself, and you can find different examples, I would say, how you can build this ecosystem. So, for example, we have examples how students did the Oxford debates using the the agents, providing them to groups. So, for example, one was kind of the students of philosophy, the second was students of whatever, sociology or cognitive science, and they are debating about something, and they, in different scenarios, you can use the humans as a judge, or you can use another agents, I would say, who are judging, right? Like in the Oxford debate, right? So this is something what we are doing. So this is not only what I am foreseeing, this is what we already have done last year or 2 years ago, right? So what I'm saying is not the future, I'm saying the past, yeah. So,
but just to be clear, because partly I think where we're going, at least where Bartek wants us to go, is this building of trust. I wonder, to what extent are there assumptions, or does it even matter that they know that it's an accepted common knowledge who is human and who is AI?
Yeah, that's a tough question, I can say. That's an interesting question. So probably, I'm not sure, because we never asked this question, like who is human, who is... So we set up it was kind of predefined. Yeah, so sometimes we are using only the kind of the simulation of debate using the different kind of agents just to check, I would say, how they behave. Sometimes we try to rebuild, for example, the sociology theory. Like, for example, we did it for the book of Ben, the games people play. Yeah, you probably knows the book. So it was kind of 50 years old book. So we try to rebuild, I would say, the social situations, I would say, with agents, the profile kind of accordingly to the setup which was done in this book. Right, so we are doing different things. So we know that these are the agents. Why we are doing this? Because on another experiment, we tried, for example, to teach the philosophy students, I would say, how to make the ethical judgment. Right, so we are simulating some situation using different schools of the Greek, I would say, philosophers or schools, yeah, and then we are presenting, what will be the answer, or what will be kind of the justification for some scenario, right? And based on that, I mean, students can observe, I would say, different debate, different the arguments which are going on, right? So this is something what we can do if we have the multi-agent stuff, and the same we are using for,
It strikes me as funny in that it's almost the typical situation flipped on its head. Here, it's almost like we're using agents, AI agents, to train humans, when usually we do the opposite. But
yeah, I mean, that's, to be honest, you can expect a different situations. Yeah, we are using the human, we are starting with humans because we need to set up and to profile these agents. Yeah, so it's not, but you can imagine also that for some experiments, we can ask agents to profile agents, I would say, to be, ready, right? So it's also somehow started, right? So, the situation which you mentioned, that agents are helping the students, I would say, at different levels, I would say, to progress. And so it's another story. So you'll find another paper which we published, I think, last year, about the math tutor, right? The agents as a math tutor for secondary or primary school, I think, at that time. Yeah. So we presented, I would say, how to not to answer immediately the task they have, but just to somehow progress with the students, I would say, through the acquiring, through the process of getting new knowledge, also checking and imagining, I would say, how much they understand, I would say, how much they know, I would say, well, what we need to repeat, right? So kind of the active mentor almost, right? So it's not, I would say, 100%, I would say, perfect. Yeah, because I would be, of course. No, but it's very interesting to see this.
Yeah, Please. It's interesting that you brought this up, and I would like eventually, after you go through, if we have time later, to return to this question, because certainly the pedagogical implications of AI agents are very close to our heart. We've had a talk in the past on that, and we're planning more talks about that in the future. And I think the connection of ethics to pedagogy is interesting to me. In other words, let's say, to use Bartek's terminology, to what extent can a teacher claim to be benevolent like in the example that you were trying to show, Bartek,
Yeah.
like how well can you know, how objectively knowable it is, you know, the sort of the state of partial knowledge that the person has, that the student has, and what will sort of the gradient, if you will, of what will help them the most. But anyway, that's a distraction for now. But I'm
No, that's a longer. I can repeat. Unfortunately, I can repeat to this, and I can give you a couple. Yeah, we are doing the theory of mind, which you probably know from the psychology. So of course we build this into the agents so they can imagine what the other agents are thinking or other people are thinking. Yeah. So most of the theories which are kind of existing in sociology and they are relating to the cognitive process, we already try to build, right, in different, but this is just different use cases. Yeah. So it's not kind of solved, but it's a lot of this stuff is just experimental and we are checking how good it could be in different cases. Yeah. So I'm happy to, let's say, follow on your question probably during the question and answering time, right? Because most of this I think interesting, and I can give you some other examples from our research from the last 2 years, right? Okay, so next, sorry, maybe the last comment. Yeah, let's stay here. Yeah, so this is more or less the summary of how we can somehow profile or equip agents with different things. Yeah, so how we can profile them, adding some personas or malevolent or benevolent or whatever we want. So we can try this. I can say a little more how we can do this. As even in the, well, I can say this even now, right? That, for example, what we also tried during this last 2 years, we tried to build kind of super ego, I would say, structure in the agent mind. So we have, in fact, in the mind of the agent, you have different minds, right? And competing, I would say, against each other, depending on the context and the kind of the perceived emotional state. I would say some of the agents can be a little bit, I would say, winning, I would say, the situation. Yeah, not going into it. Maybe it's a little bit trivial explanation, but this is more or less what we are doing, right? So it's not the single LLM, it's multi-LLM, and then once again, we have kind of the super judge, super ego, which making some ensemble of different opinions and then try to. And then from the
is this interpretable? In other words, are you explicitly structuring the agents in such a way that they have a representation of the perceived emotional states of their interlocutors? Is it something that would be interpretable if we were to freeze the simulation and look inside? Do you know what I'm saying? Is this
I know what we are saying to some extent. I would say not in all the cases, right? Some of them we are just, putting this as a flow. Sometimes we try to make a snapshot, as you say, and just check. I would say just to have some explanation. But sometimes it works a little bit as a kind of two opposite mechanisms, right? One is kind of the black box, which giving us the next action, so it's more probabilistic or whatever, as we know. But the second is more kind of the abductive thinking, right? So we have some results, and then we try to find out the reasons and go a couple levels down. I would say just to get some justification. I would say good enough. I would say for the person who is exploring the problem, right? So I cannot say always. Sometimes we try to check. It's not easy, especially when we have too much black boxes and too much this guessing, right? So, yeah. So then I can answer another question which you didn't ask. How much the decision is emotional, I would say, in the black box and kind of the intuitive, and how much is rational, right? Because another question. Can we make the agents rational versus to keep them kind of intuitive, right? That they are just guessing the answer, right? And sometimes we are just making, once again, we're using kind of the theorem provers, right? I would say to make, for example, using some belief logic or whatever, just rationalization on the fly. sometimes we are maybe using just black box, so just to guess. But anyway, I will leave it once again for the discussion, right? So I can tell you probably more what we are doing. So next slide, please. So why this is so efficient, right? So this is just a picture. Maybe you've seen this, maybe not. This is just to illustrate how quickly we are going with model skills, right? Of course, this is kind of the illustration of the Mensa test, right? The test for intelligence for humans. But the same stuff is being done for the last years, I would say, for models. And you see the progress, yeah? 2024, May, more or less this time, 2 years ago, you know, not so many and came to 100, right? To the middle of the human intelligence, yeah? The blue is human, right? Year ago, half, right? And now you see what happened. Yeah, most of the models, they are solving this simple, I would say, the simple like simple, probably for us, for me at least, it will be difficult, I would say, to get the grade at this level, right? So they are 140 or, you know, sometimes even, yeah, between 135, 145. Yeah, so it's very good. Why I'm showing this, that we can, because it shows that we can train, I would say, models, I would say, to be good well, to the level we want, or mostly exceeding the human level, to whatever we want. Of course, our mind is more adaptable and we can do much more in different areas. But if we have LLM, I would say, focused on one topic, we have no chance, right? It's always the LLM will be better, right? Because we can train. So that just to show you that why the agent could be very efficient or kind of small area. Okay, next slide, please.
It's great that you bring this up. I'm gonna just ask this as a question. I don't expect an answer. But even from the beginning of the very notion of this talk, right? Your abstract, when Bartek first came to me to talk about this, this has been in the back of my mind, and so perhaps by the end of our conversation, I might have a better understanding. That I agree with you. This was my intuition as well, that given a particular goal, you know, a well-stated objective goal, objectively testable, knowable goal, the LLM will get better than humans. We'll keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
It's sort of an optimization machine, right? That my concern when bringing this in the context of moral decision-making, ethics, is that presumably in my mind, ethics is all about setting the goal and being able to change the goal. It's the meta process, you know, and so, you know, I was struggling to see the framework that would be high level enough to, you know, to kind of, you know, which comes first, which has primacy, in other words, right? Like if you have a goal and we agree this is the goal, then I'm predisposed to thinking that the AI will win eventually. You know, it's because it's an optimization engine. But the human intelligence, or the human condition in general, not only intelligence, isn't necessarily only about that. And certainly morality is another dimension to it, which from the outside feels like it's helping us set goals, decide what the objective is, and change the objective, and not stick to only one objective, and have occasionally, you know, appear as though we are being inconsistent because we just changed the objective. So it feels almost like it's going contrary to the very essence of what AI is about. So it's in the back of my mind. How can we reconcile these two seemingly disparate?
I think that there are 2 points. One is as the title of the slide is saying, it's about the skills and capabilities, right? So this is the kind of the level we can optimize, right? And the second level is about the values, right? Whether it's ethical or whatever, which is very interesting level because is kind of I shouldn't say this, but it's very subjective, I would say, yeah, because we can have different opinions about the values, and we can find even in our culture, it's very culture dependent, right? So values on the West are completely different than values on the East, right, and South and whatever. So we can probably once again during the discussion we can discuss that, but this is a different level, and it's a little bit more complicated. Yeah, it's not so easy. I agree with you, right? It's much easier, I would say, to optimize different things and just to make a pattern matching, because what we are doing is mostly pattern matching and optimization. Yeah, that's for sure, right? So we can be better and better and better, right? When we are going level up, we are very close to values in general, whether it will be ethical value or different values. It's mostly about the rationalization, and it's about and also about beliefs, right? Because I think one is values and the second is beliefs, right? At some point, we are very close to religion, right? Because we are assuming something which cannot be even by humans. I would say people are arguing, right, about, especially when you go to guys who are dealing with physics. Yeah, so we can very strong opinions, and they are not so kind of related. Yeah, but okay, coming back to the to the slide. So on this is just for once again for your knowledge, different frameworks which make possible to build these agents. I will not go through this. I'm just giving this as a reference. If you would like to think where we are doing this, we are using this platform, I would say, to build the agents, right? So this is technical stuff. Yes, mostly guys when they want to make something more sophisticated. The lang chain is the most popular, but there are some more. Okay, the next one. Okay, so this is just example, I would say, what you can build, right? And what people are doing, right? It's from the paper from Nature. I think, I don't know, February or March this year, right? So we are building, I would say, the kind of the ecosystems which mimic, I would say, the psychiatrists, I would say, processes and discussion and models and everything, right? So we are building agents who are doing almost everything, right? So we can observe, and so that's interesting. And this is not my paper, so not my team paper. This is something what was done, I think, somewhere in the US. But it's going in this direction that, as the title will say of this paper, is reimagining the psychiatric care, right, with agentic AI. It's something what is coming. Yeah, it's a huge, also the ethical discussion. I mean, to what extent we can I would say, make it available to people. But from another side, especially in Poland, we have still huge problem with shortage of psychiatrists, especially for the young people. And the young people, more and more, they need some kind of interventions from us, and help, very often also help. Yeah, so I'm just leaving this once again as element for discussion, and this is very close also to what Bartek. Probably Bartek can also comment on this because he's more knowledgeable about this part. I'm just showing this what is possible from the technology point of view. Okay, the next one, and I think we are close to the end. This is more or less how the progress looks like. Yeah, so we're starting from foundational model, these are LLMs, and then we went to chat, then to workflow, and to orchestration of the agents, and now we are in this communication and other stuff. So it's going very quickly. Yeah, so this is once again taken from some paper from BCG, is the consulting company who is kind of monitoring what's going on. So probably if somebody would be interested, it's probably 100 pages about, but also on the level, kind of easy, I would say, to read and to follow, I would say, how it progressed. So in summary, what I wanted to say is that we have a lot of tools which will help us to build simulation, emulation, I would say, of different ecosystems, including humans. And I think the time is very interesting. Okay, so that's from my side. I'm ready to continue I would say, Q&A session when it comes to Bartek. So
Thanks, Jarek. But
in
now
your hand.
I will try be really short, and I will present our work in progress, because still this is a work in progress, and we are on the conceptual level, and we didn't make any experiments. But still, how we can use me as a philosopher, I'm wondering how people can use this technology for moral enhancement. And I know that for many traditional ethicists, even that question is controversial. Yes, but still, there are some arguments that it is possible. And our proposal, we are on the conceptual level still, is that we could use the benevolence as was understood in Aristotelian ethics and also malevolence, and introduce one benevolent agent and many, probably two, malevolent agents within these multi-agent systems. And these moral agents could be selected like writing styles. For example, be formal, be academic, be colloquial. They should be really used to easy to use somehow. And what is the idea? The benevolent agent, AI agent, aims to realize what is good for the user, aims to cultivate the virtue in the user, and it encourages courage, temperance, generosity, magnanimity, magnificence, and the truthfulness. And it leads to the golden mean between two extremes. Yes, this benevolent agent. And those are the classical virtues. And this is the concept of goodness. This is the content of this concept within this Aristotelian framework. And then we need also, that would be too easy to introduce benevolent agent, and we need also malevolent agents. And those one aims to, the malevolent agent aims to lead the user toward vice, encouraging flaved behavior. Instead of choosing courage, the user is nudged toward either cowardliness or recklessness, for example, the extremes that deviate from virtue. And those agents, I think that at least two, we are still thinking one or two or even more agents we need. They lead to excess and the deficiency. Yes, which are not the virtue. And then why we need. The user could intentionally switch between those agents, exploring diverse moral viewpoints. And for example, a benevolent agent could gently guide toward virtue, could provide affirming feedback and support, could model moral exemplars through suggestions, could foster our trust and moral self-confidence. And the benevolent agent could challenge user with ironic provocation, like Socrates did. Could build the resilience like a training builds strength. It could be used for exercises the moral, let's say, muscles, like self-control, humility, prudence, and inner strength. And could expose the pride without hate or contempt, and could train, for example, in humor. A sense of humor is also a virtue in Aristotelian ethics. Moderation, endurance, of course, distance to myself, tolerance for the critic, and etc. And for example, the benevolent agent aims to cultivate virtue like a courage, temperance, generosity, magnanimity. We've got some definitions here, or some maybe short, let's say, characterization of those virtues. And the malevolent agent would be trying to simulate something which push the user to, for example, not to the courage, but to the cowardice or rashness. Yes, they are connected with the virtue, which is courage, but they are on the both sides of extremes, which are not the virtue. And then why we introduce the malevolent agent, this is maybe the most controversial thing here. And we've got some arguments, philosophical and also psychological, and is something like a testing the authenticity of the virtues. Without temptation, one can say that we cannot know whether a moral attitude is a virtue or merely an absence of opportunity to fail. Yeah, and that is the difference that could be exposed in terms of a malevolent agent. Some kind of a moral inoculation or constructive cognitive dissonance, which is important in moral growth, is a confrontation with uncomfortable positions, and this confrontation reduces, for example, self-deception, and is forcing to moral reflection. And we've got many other arguments why we should use also malevolent, not only benevolent agent. All right, and I want to say a bit more about one specific virtue, which is specific for Aristotle, and which is not very popular in modern times. But I wanted to. It's a megalopsychia. Is in English is a magnanimity. Sorry for my pronunciation. Maybe you could help me how to pronounce correctly the name. Nevertheless, this is the virtue of someone who rightly claims great things because they are truly deserve them. Yeah, that would be the, let's say, characterization. And we've got some traits of this virtue. Knows their virtue, their true worth without arrogance. This is the person who is a megalopsychos. Yeah? Acts with dignity, calm, and independence. Seeks honor only when truly deserved. Gives generously, avoids dependence. That is a kind of a character traits. Yes, this is a virtue, which means it's a kind of a disposition to act according to goodness, let's say, or that remains steady in praise and criticism and honors virtue more than public opinion, for example. In Aristotelian ethics, we've got that kind of a moral, let's say, virtue, moral hero. And we've got also vices, extremes, and deficiency is a unfortunately, I do not know how to pronounce that word, but it's a pusillanimity, which means, this is the most important thing, what does it mean? Underestimating one's worth. Yeah? This is the deficiency of that virtue. And excess is just arrogance. Yes. All right, and we could use those agents, the benevolent and malevolent one, to if we agree that this virtue is important, to train that virtue, yeah, within the user, within ourselves, and. Here there are some examples what benevolent agent could do and what the ironic or this malevolent agent could do. And I don't want to go into the details. I should be short, but the exemplars are important somehow because in general it is difficult to know what could be the benevolent, for example, the benevolence as such. All right, but still I should be some other examples what the benevolent agent could do. For example, could encourage small repeated practices such as a gratitude exercise. It is the exercise that is in virtue ethics popular, and could be something like a guide of reflection on personal experience and moral choice. For example, let's say that I promised Ted that I will deliver a lecture, yeah, and then I could deliver the lecture, or I could, for example, disappear, yeah, and didn't answer for the emails, and then I do not answer for the email, and then. Moral agent, benevolent moral agent, could remind me. that I've got some commitment with that. Yes, because it's a kind of, for example, moral reminders. It could be used for that, and it could be helpful for me. Also, could discuss with me why I didn't answer the email. Yeah? And then before I committed to do something, and then I didn't answer the email, and this agent could be helpful in that situations, and could quite somehow the reflection of my personal experience. All right, what else? Could present me exemplars from the history. I've got some moral conflict, and the idea how Socrates could solve that. And I could ask, for example, are there any letters of, let's say, Plato to someone when he's analyzing the same, let's say, or analogical situation, moral conflict? And in virtue ethics, we call it virtue portraits, which means that we need to have moral authorities and moral exemplars. I would even say moral heroes somehow, and to know how the moral hero is trying to resolve the moral conflict is a important knowledge. It's not an obligation, yeah, but it's a kind of a knowledge that could be provided by almost probably all popular LLMs at now, without any trouble. And helping users, this is very important. Part of the virtue is name is that I've got ability to name the virtue. That within my conceptual framework, I could differentiate between virtues and vices. And for example, to distinguish courage from bravado, or humility from false modesty, or honesty from brutality. Yes, and if I could do that within, of course, this is nothing somehow, because the virtue as such is a kind of a disposition and character disposition. But the naming virtue also helps, and LLMs could really easily help us with naming. All right. Offering moral reminders, I mentioned about that. Okay, and I was using here with these examples the Oxford Global Leadership Initiative. That is really initiative based on the virtue ethics, and they've got some concrete ideas how to, but without any agents. But it is, I would say, really important pedagogical initiative. Maybe that you would be interested in that. I was really impressed by what they did in Oxford. All right. Okay, what are the risks? Of course, avoid switching benevolent and malevolent agents prevents moral imposition and indoctrination. And all of us, we do not like, moral heroes that knows everything. No. We've got malevolent agent, and this agent could deconstruct, the moral heroes, or moral, maybe not heroes, but moral signs. Yeah, there is no place for moral signs here. There is no room, rather. All right, not everything I said about moral science, and our idea, and this idea is, for example, also in the paper Lara and Deckers from 2020, that those agents could be moral enhancers, nothing more, but they could be used for that aim. All right, what about conclusions? Aristotle's concept of benevolence, but as wishing the good for another, of another for their own sake. This is important. This is not being kind, as I said at the beginning. Offers a valuable framework for ethical AI design. And interaction with LLMs can support, in our opinion, reflection and development, moral development, and especially probably if we will use those multi-agent system with benevolent and at least two malevolent agents, as I try to define them. and they could LLMs serve as moral enhancers, but only if they combine the benevolence and training-oriented, let's say, malevolent agents, and that is our, let's say, hypothesis, moral hypothesis, that in times of the sycophantic AI, which is confining all the content of our, let's say, conscious part, we need also the malevolent part, which, let's say, bring us to our unconscious part of our whole life, speaking in Jungian, let's say, perspective. All right, that's it. Thanks a lot. It's almost 1 hour. I hope that we would be really quicker, but still, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you, Bartek and Jarek, and I'll take the fault because, as my collaborators know full well, I have a tendency to over interrupt. But I hope that the flow was clear to the audience. I mean, I certainly learned to question some of my prior kind of beliefs, or I had, as I described before, I was a little bit unclear where this was going. It's much clearer to me now. I have more questions, which I think is a and from my perspective, it's a sign of a deeper understanding that I have more questions. But I want to open it up to the audience. I'm sure there may be more interesting questions beyond me. Yeah. Irfan.
Yes. So I probably have more questions as the discussion will evolve, but I wanted to ask Bartek to comment a bit more on the Jungian concept of unconsciousness that he mentioned at the end, and how malevolent agents can tap into that.
That's very good question. Because I was just even before our talk, we are trying to prepare a conceptual paper with Jarek on this introducing the malevolent agents. And as I said, those malevolent agents could be a bit controversial from a traditional point of view. And that's why I need to have many arguments for introducing them. And I've got some psychological, philosophical, maybe even sociological arguments. But what I'm thinking about, it is not, it's a work in progress, Irfan. Please remember about that. I somehow, let's say, in Jungian perspective, the personality is complicated. Yes, has many parts. And for example, we've got the shadow. And if the shadow is unconscious in the part of which is not consciousness within our personality, then the shadow somehow could control our whole life, and also this that life which is which is a pure conscious, and in my opinion, many academicians, in many academicians, we've got that this is the case. Yes, that we've got a lots of content which is clear and is not behind the awareness. And but the real control of the conscious life is with shadow, which we are not aware, which the person is not aware, and that is my intuition that the malevolent agent would take our, let's say, shadow, would take our persona, would take our for example, what else we've got? Anima and animus and some collective archetypes, could press a bit on the conscious part and then make a bigger and force us to be much more aware of this unconscious part. And from a Jungian perspective, the real happy life, I would say, is a balance between those two. If there is no balance, yes, that or that one, then we are in a big trouble somehow, and even in the psychiatric sense, not even the moral sense, in the psychiatric sense, because Jung was a psychiatrist, and that is my intuition, Irfan. I didn't work with that argument in details. Yes, and I'm thinking still about that argument. If I'm right or not, that this malevolent agent is not only about morality. It's not about only flourishing in the moral sense, but it's also about that unconscious part of our personality. Yeah? When I was looking for a deeper arguments, then I found Jungian perspective very attractive. Oh, that would be my answer.
It feels a little bit like maybe trying to make explicit and more visible and transparent what for example, what you're referring to as the sort of the shadow side, the side of you that you might have been tempted to follow without acknowledging. Yeah, and with respect to this, in my mind, connects also with what you mentioned earlier as the power of LLMs to name things, the power in general to name things, and that the LLM can serve that purpose. And I want to play a little bit devil's advocate here, in search of a happy medium.
Malevolent agent is that is the role.
Exactly. I am doing that consciously as well. That. And I think, it referred, with respect to what you just mentioned for Jung, the Jungian balance idea, not all the subconscious needs to be made conscious. In fact, it cannot.
Of course.
And so, but coming to terms with that in some sense, in other words, there's an analogy in this with conversations we have. Okay, so maybe I'm going out on a limb here, and my collaborators, especially Matt, I hope will pick this up. So I'm doing it in a provocative manner on purpose. But much of our conversation over the years in our group has been about the possibility of a mathematical mindset to inform a better sort of human condition, if you will, a better search for a good life as a human. And the particular mathematical disposition I have in mind is the awareness that you are as a mathematical agent, as a mathematician, let's say, as a attempting to do the impossible, right? It's a Sisyphean task. You're trying to find truth, but truth always, in some sense, evades you. There's aspects of truth that will always evade you, and you will always keep looking for them and keep uncovering new truths, but it will never be encompassed. There's not a terminal state where you have all the truth that there will ever be. In a similar sense, there's an analogy here to the morality question of or specifically the aspect of uncovering our unconscious motivations. Perhaps it's useful to see the other side, just like it's useful for a mathematician to come to terms with the ways in which what he or she claims is wrong, is not fully adequate. In other words, that error is an equally integral aspect of the mathematical experience as truth, it's somewhere where they interact. It's at the boundary that you're trying to find, right? That you're trying to probe that boundary, but that boundary is not it's not reducible to anything but its search, where you're sort of going back and forth and you're kind of finding but you can't like reduce it to a algorithmic set where you say, okay, that's I know I have it now. I have, you always require the other side to, and so I'm seeing it a little bit this way. And in my mind, this is, a kind of a Jungian perspective where you can never only be good and know that you're good.
And
you have to,
unfortunately, I need to agree with you in a sense that that this malevolent agent, the idea behind, is exactly the same as you described. The role of the error in mathematical disposition, and of course mathematical dispositions as moral dispositions are interconnected, and we agree on that. And the role of this malevolent agent is to push to the boundary of possible error somehow. Yeah, that is the and to see somehow, to name somehow, to discuss, to experience those possible, even possible, of course, possible errors within the moral life. Yeah, that's the idea behind.
May I will add a little bit to this metaphor of mathematical guys, say, to the math guys. Because with LLMs, I would say you can go even further, because you can, at the same time, consider different scenarios. So we can go a little bit towards the Thomas Kuhn idea about incommensurability, right? That he talked about that in context of different teams of scientists, working on the same topic. So all the teams think that they claim they have kind of the truth, right? But what we can do now, I would say, we can do more or less the same in the kind of substitute of the mind of the agent, right? So we can consider this too, right? So and it's coming back to this what Bartek said about benevolent, malevolent. You can make this kind of the fight, I would say, even multiplied, I would say, to more benevolent than one and more malevolent than one, right? And then we can have the different opinions. Yeah? So that's one comment. The second about the consciousness and unconsciousness, right? It's even more complicated, right? Because what I said about the intuition is mostly this black box stuff, right? So it can be intuition in terms when we would like to solve something, and for example, whether to give somebody a grant or not, and then we have some kind of the black box will say this way or another, but can also be used to the moral problems, right? And we can get some answers about that. And what is tricky is that we can simulate the answer like unconscious answer with the LLMs, one or many, and in the same time we try to do exactly what humans are doing very often, namely that if we have some idea or some kind of illumination, then we try to rationalize this, right, using some theory or whatever. Yeah. So when you talk about mathematical, I was a guy who works in mathematics, they always saying that they have some idea, without any, support, kind of rational support, and then they got the root, the kind of the justification for this using some abductive, I would say, reason. Yeah. So more or less, we are doing this with the agents. And by the way, if you are using the models, the chat, or especially Chinese models, they are saying what they are doing, and please don't trust them, because they are just saying what they want to say. Yeah. So the process of thinking using could be completely different, right? So they are making justification and saying, okay, I'm doing this, but this is not true to them, right? Sometimes it's exactly what they are doing. Sometimes they are just doing what they want to say us.
Yeah,
right.
but the main difference that I see,
right.
but maybe it's not a difference. Maybe this is so,
This.
you know, maybe it's my predisposition, is that whether we as humans trying to interpret what AIs are doing, or, you know, the designers or whatever, essentially the AI, we see the AI as always having a goal, having a particular goal, a fixed goal, because
right.
it's an optimizing, you know, engine,
yeah.
essentially. Whereas humans can be construed as being that way, but inadequately. And in fact, they don't need to be construed that way. Jung didn't, for example, see humans that way. So humans, you know, could afford to be inconsistent, and change their mind. And part of the change, not only your mind, but change what you act. So not only what you say you're doing, but presumably what you are actually doing, what is actually driving you. I mean, I wonder if this is what I just did, what I just said is a model in my mind, like a mental model of how I think of a human and how I think of an AI. So I may be wrong, of course, but this is my, you know, I'm just describing my predisposition, right? So if I think that
I think I know what you are saying, but
change their truly, what will make an AI truly change what they're trying to do and convince me that in fact they did, as opposed to me thinking that they always are still kind of, you know, maximizing probabilities or something like that, you know?
Yeah, they are maximizing, and that's for sure. So of course, because they are built using such a kind of the components, right? Which are maximizing, but they are maximizing in a very special way, because some people are saying that we are also maximizing.
Well, I know.
Right?
So I was just going to say,
cognitive scientists, they are saying that we have exactly the same as humans. Of course, much more complicated. Yeah, because I just want to say one more thing. Yeah, because a lot of people are thinking that the neural networks is exactly kind of the metaphor what we have in our minds. Of course not. Yeah, because we have a lot of other mechanisms which are not electrical, right? And mostly the neural networks are using the metaphor of the electrical part of our neural networks. The whole biochemical stuff is kind of outside of the story, right? But it's very much influenced our thinking, right? But what I'm just one additional thing is what I can say, that if this is the difference between LLM and the agent, because agent could be inconsistent. Agent can keep, I would say, 5, 10, whatever number of different kind of the perception of the word they are exactly in any point of time, and they can skip between them. Yeah, so they don't know which one is the best. Yeah, so they can think in parallel in different way about exactly the place and the status of everything, right? We can put on top the mechanism, you know, just to give them a chance to select which one they want to be kind of which one they select as the most promising, and which one they want to keep, which is, once again, I don't want to say exactly what we are doing, but it's a little bit mimic what humans are doing, right? That we can have, you know, I don't know what is the solution, so let's try with this theory. Okay, it doesn't work, so let's try with this one. I put some notes about the previous, I would say, approach. Maybe I'll come back to this in an hour, but let's try with another one. And this is what we are also mimicking with the agents. Yeah? So they have different, you know, it's not humans to the end, so they are not humans, right? But we are somehow mimicking, I would say, what we are doing in terms of functional, I would say, approach, right? So,
well, I mean, I
don't know.
All I was going to say is that I think we built AIs right now to instantiate a model of our mind.
Yeah.
I'm making a philosophical point. In other words, certainly we can understand our mind as being locally optimizing always, you know, but do we have to, or is this equivalent to our mind, you know, or maybe there's an irreducibility of existence, of the human existence, let's say, that is not necessarily, how can I say this? It isn't instantiated by by this model of it. That you know, we are we can describe how humans are. We do all the time, right? We say, okay, he's trying to say this, you know, he's trying, like, you're probably trying to figure out what is it that I'm trying to say, and you imagine that I have something in mind that I want to say, and I'm trying to optimize like how close I get, you know, to that. And so this is a way of seeing me, right? But who's to say that this is really what I'm trying to do? You know, in other words, maybe I have no choice, or maybe I'm just being like the actual experience of being as a human, you know, from inside, the subjective experience. For that matter, the subjective experience of the AI, you know, is a different question. But I wonder if, maybe this is just, you know, a little bit, you know, going too much into the weeds here, but I wonder if you think, with your experience with LLMs, especially these agents, not just the LLMs, but the agents embedded in a social environment, if you have evidence or intuition that they can transcend their specific instantiations as locally optimizing agents, and essentially, you know, develop emergent properties that are quite separate from how they were implemented in the first place.
Yeah, emergency, I think, is sitting in LLMs, right? So, but what you said about the kind of when I'm listening to you, of course, I try to somehow guess, I would say, or understand or guess, or whatever, which direction you are going. And, you know, I'm also thinking about how to answer to this, right? Or how to kind of keep the conversation with you, right? But LLMs or agents, they can do, or we can try to do more or less the same. Whether they will be better or worse is a different story, but we are putting into their behavior something what is called theory of mind. Yeah, so with some other solvers, so they are modeling you as a person. So they're getting more and more. The agent is getting more and more information about yourself. Yeah, and based on that, he starts using this probabilistic, I would say, network to guess what you will say, right? So it will be nothing about kind of religious or whatever, the very subconscious or whatever. It's mostly, once again, if we ask whether the agent can guess what are you saying and what you say in the next sentence, they can guess. And sometimes they can do this in terms, maybe not a formal even, but because there are some experiments on that stuff, they are guessing kind of, if they will observe you for a couple weeks, they can guess probably with 80% or 85% what you are saying. Yeah, but they need to read about you, listen to your lectures, right? Yeah, and then they can guess, right? Whether they have some very internal consciousness, I have no idea, but they are very efficient machines, I would say, to guessing, right? About anybody. That was experiment, I would say. I don't know which university, but it's from California. It was written, I would say, last year when they took to 1,000 people and they invite them for kind of the session and discuss about whatever climate or whatever. They make a video recording, and then they ask the models and the humans to answer the questions. Yeah, 85%. I would say so human and avatar, you know, created after 2 hours of observing the person. 85%, I would say, common answers. So it's very close. Whether they have idea about these people, I have no idea, but they are very efficient.
Yeah, but you know, but is this what drives human discussions? I mean, you said you're trying obviously to understand what I mean and to follow the conversation, but I don't think you or I or any human ever really tries to reduce that other person or other interlocutors into a model and then say, you know what, I understand them well enough, I don't ever have to talk to them again. I've reduced it, it's all in my head, right? You want
unless you are psychopathic. Unless you are psychopathic.
Whereas, you know, the AIs are doing that. They are essentially trying to reduce you down, you know. So
they are psychopaths. Yeah, I agree with you. They are very efficient psychopaths.
Exactly.
That's true.
It's what are they trying? Why are they trying to do that? So another way to put it is, and I really loved, you know, I think it was something you said, Jarek, earlier that that got me thinking about it, but it's very much also the mathematical, in the mathematical experience of like knowing that something is right before you actually try to prove it, or having a feeling like, right. And, you know, so that ethical question in mathematics, as we say, is the why. Not, you know, the sort of the why is this true, not the fact that it's true, not a protocol for it to be true. That doesn't answer the why, right? But the moral question is why should it be true, you know, in the first place? What sense does it make? So in a similar way, I'm asking, why are the AIs trying to do that? Why are they trying to reduce us down to a set of rules? We're not, perhaps, first of all, we might not want to be reduced to a set of rules, but it's also philosophically possible we're not reducible to a set of rules.
Because in general, if I can kind of interrupt you, is in general, there are some people who are saying that LLMs are just, you know, they're doing just a big compression of data, so of what they are getting, and they try to keep a lot of observations or signals or whatever name we put, so we are convert them to digital form, right, to tokens or whatever, and then we convert, you know, we compress them as much as possible, just to make a efficient, I would say, retrieval or efficient, I would say, generation, and it will be very close to original, I would say, data, or it can be a little bit kind of modified, So just from mathematical perspective, is that, and it's just this, right? It's nothing special there, right? So whatever we have, I would say, like artifacts or you know, something what makes us surprised is it's mostly because it's huge, So the space about especially the latent space, So different kind of subspaces which we can have, I would say, for kind of searching of some patterns or sub-patterns are, you know, there's such a magnitude of this that, you know, this intuition, mathematical intuition can be seen as a, you know, that we are not looking at the final kind of symbolic description of the problem, but we are just searching for patterns, I would say, in the latent space. And by the way, there are some research about this, I would say, especially in computer graphics and in computer graphics or computer vision, right? They try to support of once again, the recognition of different objects or, you know, the interpretation of the scenes using some latent spaces, just to make it faster, right? Because we need to, So this is more or less what's going on. There's no answer yet, So it's still the ongoing research, right? So your questions are very right, because we don't know, basically, It's we only know that this is mathematically in theory easy. But in practice, when it started to be bigger and bigger, all the emergencies started to happen, right? And,
I would love to get Matt to say some of the things he's been typing, because certainly, for example, the pattern recognition that you were talking about, Jarek, he earlier mentioned something he likes to bring up, this example of, you know, the pattern 2, 4, 6. And if the next is the next number 8, or what if somebody says 7? Is that wrong necessarily? And you know, we've
so thank you, Ted, for suggesting that I bring this up. I've been chomping at the bit, as you can as you can imagine. One reason I bring up that example is that this discussion about how LLMs are passing Mensa tests for high IQ, okay, or at least, at least average maybe or higher. So I don't know much about Mensa tests specifically, but when I was a youngster, I took we were required to take IQ tests in school on an annual basis when I was in elementary school, and eventually that stopped. But I do recall that I did well on them. I did very well on them. But I also recall that some of the kinds of questions on there were things like this particular mathematical question I put in there. Very specific example. And you don't have a choice. Well, you do have a choice. You have like 4 choices. And you find out that you chose the wrong thing or you chose the right thing. The dichotomy. You either... Here I have the 2, 4, 6, 8, and the only answer accepted was 10. You were wrong if you didn't put 10. Well, mathematically, that's incorrect. I can tell you why. I can extend that sequence with a polynomial extrapolation, and that would be another correct answer. And that next answer could be 7, or it could be the dog in my backyard. I don't have one, but pretend I do. Okay, I can mathematically, now that I've progressed through many years of doing mathematics and so forth, I see everything as mathematical, and that's one reason we have LLMs, is that people have seen everything as being part of mathematics in some sense, and maybe not completely. And I'm not trained as a philosopher or as a psychologist, so I don't know the right terminology to throw in here. But mathematically, I know that would be the wrong answer to tell someone they're wrong mathematically because they gave an answer like 7. Now, my question that I have there is, if you were designing a tutor to correctly teach mathematics to youngsters, and that tutor asks the youngster to extend such a sequence, and the youngster says 7 is my answer, how does the tutor respond? Because I know how I would want a teacher to respond, and they don't respond this way, because they follow a book that said 10's the next answer, the next number, especially in 3rd grade and 6th grade or younger. And this, in my view, is indoctrination to a socially accepted answer that turns out to be wrong.
Okay, I can.
Sorry to
That's
jump in. So, I feel like the question itself is ill-posed, right? Sometimes, Matt. But yeah,
My question
go
or
ahead,
their
Gary.
question?
Their question.
Their
It's not a
question.
good
It is
question to
ill-posed.
ask. Yeah.
It's a wrong kind of question to ask.
I can try to ask. Yeah, I can try to ask, because thanks for this question. I'm using a much simpler question to my students, because I'm teaching also introduction to AI, right? So I'm asking them whether 1 + 1 = 2 or 2 + 2 = 4.
Okay.
And they say, of course. And I'm saying, of course not, because 1 + 1 is 10, right? I just changed the baseline, right, from 10th to 2. And 10th is a very special, it's not so often, right? So it's even easier. 1 + 1 or 2 + 2 is not 4, right? So I fully agree with you. And this is, thanks for this example. And it comes to the point that what is very much important is that the context engineering, right? So this is what we call the context engineering. So if we don't know the context, we cannot interpret. And this is what I teach my students, right? So we cannot answer to any question.
This is why I am really interested in the topic of the title of your talk, and what you talked about today, is that I teach using what is often called the discover method, or the discovery method, or the Texas method, and you're referring a lot to Socrates or Socratic method, which is very similar, almost essentially the same, I think. But when I taught, I would ask the students what their answer is, and then started a dialogue. So this is how I would
Yeah.
want the tutor to respond. I would want the tutor to ask the student, why did you give that answer?
Yeah.
He gives a good explanation. Like, suppose the student says, I sat down and calculated a polynomial, and these are the coefficients, and that gives that answer. The tutor
Yeah.
needs to say, oh, that's a very good response.
Yeah. To be honest, I
Or
like
if the
this method.
student, or if
Yeah.
the student says anything can be the next answer, that's why I gave 7 as the answer.
Yeah.
The tutor needs to be able to respond accordingly. Otherwise, we're automating stronger way training of younger people in the misunderstanding of mathematics.
Yeah. I have two comments. One is I like it very much because I spend some of my time, professional time, with consulting. When we recruit people, we exactly did what you said. Yeah. So we did such a simple task, and then we were just following the process of thinking, right? Rather than to say 10 or whatever number. Yeah. So it was mostly about this. So I like your method for sure. Yeah, but there's another point which I can say as a teacher, or also many years teacher. Yeah, the question is who is teaching for what, right? Because
Oh, of course. Yeah.
not everybody is kind of on this level. I would say that you can go with this direction. Some people, they need probably to be thought in a very simple way. Sorry for saying this, but
No, I
our
understand.
success is, to give them at least some baseline, which will they keep, I would say, over their life. Because sometimes what I see that you are teaching, and after 2 years they forgot everything. So, so sometimes it's better than they will say 10, or they have no complete idea what to do. Yeah. So sorry, I'm not just discussing with your method because I like this. Because I always like to teach the people who can think in a more kind of open way or proper way. I would say this, but it's not so easy, I would say always. Bartek,
So
I think I will pass to you about the Socratic stuff because I am not so strong on that stuff.
okay.
So I wonder.
Yeah, I don't read Socrates or about him a lot. I just have heard this teaching method called the Socratic method, and I was exposed to it in college, and I use it myself based on, so it's a practicum for me. But it's also based on what I consider a more compassionate way to teach mathematics. That there are lots of questions for which there's not just one right answer. And mathematically, we know that, but in society, they don't. You hear this all the time from people. Mathematics is different from everything else because there's only one right answer to any problem. That's just not true, and it never was.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but they think that mathematics is a source of certainty. And understandably, people want more certainty in an increasingly uncertain feeling world. But it's not, actually. And again, this is, I mean, if anything, but I was going to say mathematics is more about if-then statements than anything else, inferences. But anyway, I want, because maybe this is relevant here. I want to return back to something you had said, Bartek, earlier, in response to one of my early questions, which was that there's a presumption here of objective truth. There's sort of an ontology, if you will, of the agents. But of course, in the social ecologies of agents that Jarek is describing, and in any kind of physical instantiation of the agents, surely the question is more an epistemic one, like in the sense that, well, let's take the example of the teacher, forget the agent, the actual teacher, like Matt, who says something to their student. And, we can believe temporarily, let's just go by the assumption, this is the if of the statement, that Matt actually intended the comment to be for what he perceives what he knows to be the good of the student, right? So in that sense, definitionally, he's a benevolent agent. But how can the student know that? And how is that knowable to any other agent, except as taken as primitive? In other words, it's an if-then statement. If we start as thinking of him in this way, then we can make certain inferences. But part of the problem is that there's two parts to the problem. One is that the other agents may not necessarily perceive that as the reality. And the second is he may in fact be making a factual mistake. He may not truly know what is the good of the other person. So even though he convinces himself that he acts on their behalf, he acts as a benevolent agent. So he has the self-identity of the benevolent agent, but he inadvertently doesn't fulfill that role or whatever. So how are we to wrap our heads around that?
Here we've got the bunch of issues. For example, let's do philosophy for a moment. Aristotle said that if you are a virtuous person, for example, you are a courageous person or you are a wise person, then there is no possibility that there is a kind of a virtue that you haven't got that virtue, which means that if you've got one virtue, then you've got all of them. Yeah, that perspective, ontological perspective, is I would say very difficult to argument for. Why? Because we've got moral heroes, moral saints, even, and then others. Yeah. But that was a position of Aristotle, and even I would say, even if I cannot agree with Aristotle, then still that was a strong position of really strong philosopher, and in that sense, if the virtuous person recognize some goodness of some person, then there is no place, there is no room for doubt here. In let's say in that ontological position. But of course, we know, all of us probably, we know that it is this is extremely difficult to know what could be the good of some other person, but even what is the good for me, myself. It is not so easy to know. Maybe it's even more difficult. But still, we are aware of that. But that doesn't mean that there is no epistemic access to the goodness of my goodness and some and my let's say let's say friends, for example, yes, or family members, and I would, there is a lot of issues, but one issue you said someone could be mistaken, yeah, and even an experienced teacher could be mistaken, and we know that an experienced teacher is not mistaken, how to say, on regular basis. Is mistaken only from time to time, probably. Yeah, an experienced teacher. This experience is really important here. Also for Aristotle was important because the wise person should be experienced. And then for me the question is, what is the reaction of this person who was mistaken just after realizing that that was a mistake. And that would be my answer. Of course, there is a possibility to be to be in mistake. There is a possibility for a moral error somehow. But the question is how we react on that. and the virtuousness of the character, I would say, is rather connected with the reaction. Yeah. For example, I could say, and probably an experienced teacher will not do that, but how to say in English. The reaction could be like that I'm still because I'm a teacher, I was right, even if I was wrong, but I was right, and that is the official in the classroom, for example, my position. Yes, that I was right, and then what would be the answer of the rest of the classroom? Yeah, I would say, yeah, because even young students, they could recognize errors, and then I would say that that was not a virtuous response for mistake. Yes. I don't know if answering your question, in detail, but that would be that could be one, let's say, one possible response. And what is more, I think also that there are real differences between human beings in capacity to recognize the goodness of other people, and this is a kind of ability that could be trained also. In my opinion, and there are the differences could be really huge. And some of our colleagues, our friends are very good on that. And especially there is a kind of a criterion how to choose within your, let's say, within your how to say, community. Let's say, yes. The question is, let's say that you've got some moral issue, and then you are considering the issue, considering you've got no answer, but we are thinking about that, and then the question is, somehow we call to some person, we are selecting some person, and we are asking for an advice. I'm doing from time to time. I'm calling to my friends and I'm asking for an advice, and especially for my senior professors. I've got two friends, and they are senior professors, and I'm calling to them and I'm asking. No, I'm doing some stuff, and truly speaking, frankly speaking, I'm not sure what should I do. And then we've got some dialogue, as Matt said, it's a dialogue, and then in 80% of the cases, I've got the answer how I should, after this dialogue and conversation, how I should act. And in that sense, Ted, this is another answer why for your question, because it's some kind of a criterion. It's a kind of a criterion that for selecting the people that you are asking for an advice. And those guys probably are very good, are talented somehow, gifted in recognizing the goodness of others. If the issue, of course, was about the goodness, yes. I'm not sure if I'm convincing, if I con, but it's a kind of a tool, let's say, to recognize someone who is a gifted somehow or talented, and it could give me an advice and could be my moral enhancer somehow in that
We
issue.
do that. This is definitely part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think there is what you're bringing up now. I do like this, the collective, in some sense, aspect of morality, which isn't the most natural thing to talk about, because in traditional terms, ethics is sort of an individual attribute. You're sort of, you're a moral agent individually, but the actual, in other words, it would be accessible in principle, whether you're a benevolent or malevolent agent, entirely in terms of, what you do. But I think the human experience of morality involves other people always. It's a contextual, relational thing, where, we know it's culturally driven. We say that, and we now realize that, of course, it depends what others would think. And sometimes, this is not an algorithmic reduction in the sense that sometimes it could go both ways, right? Socrates, for example, was, died as a result of standing out, right? And being deemed by his peers as, unfit or a malevolent agent, in fact.
It's
but
risky.
at the same time, he accepted that. He made the moral choice against, in some sense, his own good, if you think good is the continuation of his life. So I wonder, when I asked my previous question, and thank you for this kind of extemporaneous attempt to deal with what I'm sure was a kind of an unfair question a little bit, because, your perspective is an ontological one. And I wanted to sort of, push you in the less, in the more murky waters of, the, epistemology here, in the sense, what can be known. But I had an idea in mind, and I want to try this out for you. And it was inspired by your own descriptions earlier of, when you were trying to describe malevolent and benevolent agents. I found that very useful. And I would love your slides, by the way. So, but the juxtaposition, it seemed to me, what struck me was the following. Could there be a more kind of a systemic, almost like cybernetic type of perspective here, which is objective? In other words, it's away from the agents. It has to do more with the way the system fits together, where effectively the benevolent agent creates or essentially balancing feedback loops, whereas the malevolent agent essentially creates reinforcing feedback loops, the things that go to the extremes as opposed to the middle. That this is maybe something that can be accessible from the outside, from a black box perspective, without knowing the details. I wonder. I mean, again, I am probably wrong.
Idea. Very good idea. Behind is a network. Behind must be a network, and we need to discuss that also this idea. But I need to mention one thing more, because this concept of objective, it is not so clear from the ontological point of view. I wanted I used this concept at the beginning because I wanted to emphasize the Aristotelian, let's say, substantialism and kind of an ontology of human being. Yes, that, for example, the idea of flourishing, and the idea of the unity of all virtues, and another idea that there is a one way of virtue and many ways of being wrong. This is another idea which is behind, which is also very strong morally, meta-ethically speaking. And somehow when we use the Aristotelian framework, we need to be aware of those ontological presuppositions, and that's why I mentioned that I use the concept, let's say, objective. In that sense. Nevertheless, for example, in Gardenian ontology, Roman Ingarden was a phenomenologist, student of Edmund Husserl. He distinguished thousands, I would say, sub-concepts of this being objective in the ontological sense. And what is the message? The message is that even If we are talking about some independent, let's say, independent entities, which are existentially autonomous, and they are existentially, let's say, self-dependent, and then even in that sense, we could, if we've got some entities like that, for example, mathematical objects or structures, in my opinion, are exist in that kind of a way of existing. But still, this is not the same. This claim that there are mathematical structures who are existing in that ideal, strong sense and existentially really intensive, then, for example, they are atemporal, and then this is the question about the access to that structures is different question. For example, I could say that there are that, let's say, objective and ideal even entities, and also I could say that no one has a full access to that content,
Right.
and that was also kind of a attempt to in philosophy of mathematics of MacLean.
I was going to say this
Yeah.
is very much like, you know, to link with my earlier comment, the question of whether truth exists and perhaps even is unique, but is forever inaccessible to mathematicians, as opposed to the truth simply doesn't actually exist, is inconsistent to make it as an entity in itself, and is just an emergent property that is always incomplete in some sense, you know, or something to that effect. And I wonder, I mean, another aspect, to bring it more to the moral ground, I mean, the more conventional moral ground, perhaps the idea of you know, whether there exists objective or universal or absolute, maybe in philosophical terms, this is the more appropriate way of saying it.
Absolute is very intense,
good.
very intense.
Right, very intense. So absolute goods that might not be accessible to us or even describable in other terms, you know, but as opposed to the opposite. So while allowing for moral judgments to be contextual and to be, you know, context, well, cultural and everything emergent, but at the same time to perhaps believe that they're nevertheless always driven by some absolute that we just don't have direct access to. We only have partial access at any point in time. And so that's why we're incomplete, and we always have to, you know, keep changing and evolving. But that doesn't, maybe this is, I'm trying to put other words to what you said, that maybe the, you know, whether it's useful to think that there exists this absolute thing, even if we might not have access to it, as a motivator, as a kind of an engine that makes us move in that direction.
Even if we are not thinking about mathematical structures, for example, for Jung, who was not an idealist philosopher, he was a psychiatrist, really psychiatrist. The collective unconscious, which is based on the archetypes, is universal in that sense. That you are saying. Exactly in that sense for Jung, and he said that that it is universal because of the universality of the human brain. Even he used that kind of the argument that of course there are different cultures and different different way of living somehow, but still the brain around the world for human beings it's somehow invariant. That was his argument for this universality for Jung. I just want to mention that it's not only about mathematical structures. It could be also about some archetypes, like, for example, being mother. Yeah, is a kind of an archetype.
I want to invite Grady. Grady has been so patiently listening. I know that a lot of things are probably going through your mind. Grady's a member of our group that often talks about how mathematical perspectives can change the social experience. In other words, make us be better members of society. And I can't help but think, you know, I don't know if, for example, some vision of, you know, better human future society, you know, might involve AI agents. Like, are we, like, where's the boundary between sort of moral, the morality of the moral evolution of the human versus the, you know, the moral evolution, if you will, of society? And you talked about the society of agents, but what about the society of humans? What are we to learn about it? I don't know if Grady or Irfan, if you have anything to say about that. How are you left thinking about it now?
It's so many things are presented in the area of my concerns, Ted. And right now, what he said about the computer language application of our thinking and moral decision making, it's still just sort of in my head. I can't come up with a question or response about it because I've never looked at it outside of my own frame of reference. And now I'm looking at a model of what basically is an archetype of how people think, and an archetype or basic structure of the process of making decisions about good and bad. And for some reason, this model next to my human self-understanding, they're just sort of looking at each other, and I'm trying to figure out what they're saying.
I mean, so Grady, from your experience and your interactions with us, you often have shown that you value the dialogue, the dialogic perspective, like Matt was talking about earlier, but even in broader social contexts, in the search of right and wrong, or in the that it's a that, you know, there's value, there's intrinsic value in other perspectives, right? In you know, in not in the ways in which any one statement you're going to make is incomplete, is not infallible, it's not the last word. So it feels to me like, you know, the environment, the platform that Bartek and Jarek are proposing might offer a way to kind of to create almost like a little society of interlocutors that you can play with, that you can never, you know, you can have well, in its best instantiation, right? You can actually have a dialogue with them so that you can test your moral convictions and, you know, and be pushed to consider other possibilities, even ones that come from your subconscious that you didn't want to admit. Can you imagine such a situation?
Well, the younger generation, as one of my siblings put it, the generation since Steve Jobs and handheld devices, that's a pencil to young people coming up. So the doorway and the threshold to the conversation you're talking about, Ted, is just omnipresent. I mean, the device is there, they can carry it with them. Computer programs can be so simplified. So the kind of moral engagement and questioning that AI presents is certainly a bright spot on the horizon, because what's plaguing America right now is that deep polarization between values, like what's good and what's bad for America, what is really American, which is a more ontological question. And Donald Trump is leading a malevolent movement to really end the debate and the discussion. When you have polarization on a massive popular discursive scale that we have now, by definition, you're not going to reach agreement because your premises are so different, and you're going to continue to argue. So a way forward, and certainly a asset that this AI model of moral decision making, is that it provides the young generation a tool that could be a game to think about how we think. When you have polarization, by definition, you're going to keep arguing. But at the next level up, where you then examine, well, meta-wise, how are we thinking about this, and what are the rules about thinking on that level? Meta is already a part of young people's vocabulary. And I mean, it would just be a short step to introducing them to the notion in a very everyday, common, everyday sense way that has huge potential. So that's exciting.
Mm. Yes, thank you. It also, I like the fact that, and it was implicit in what you were just saying, I think, Grady, that in some sense, you never said this explicitly, but I think this environment where you have like different agents, and you kept saying, Bartek, a benevolent and multiple malevolent agents, but it almost like takes away a problematic aspect of our interactions with LLM, which is the authoritative aspect. Like we ask, one of the reasons, one of the ways in which I advise my students to beware of how they interact with AIs is not to take what they say for the truth. I mean, at the very least, just like what I say, I don't want them to take what I say as the truth, but even more so because there is no truth protocol. Even when I am trying, let's say, to say something and I check myself and I'm aware that maybe I'm, that there's some uncertainty in what I say, the LLMs don't have really a way of checking. They don't intend to necessarily find truth, right? But the fact that you're juxtaposing multiple ones and you're creating an environment where they're interacting, so there's not one authoritative agent by itself, I think is a step forward in my mind in the ways we interact with AIs. Like, not to take as one AI. We say we interact with AI, but the fact that they're agents means there are differences between them, and it's okay, and that better captures the multiplicity of the space of being moral, let's say, of what is good, than necessarily a priori saying, we're all converging to the one, like we have to listen to the authority or the validity of the one agent. However, my concern, again, I mean, I'm coming back to the original statement, is there's a shared humanity among human interlocutors, and there's obviously not that. I mean, we have priors. When we deal with agents, with AI agents, we have priors, right? We just like we have priors when we deal with humans, and they prejudice us, and we have like biases, right? And much of the work that we do with humans in schools and in other settings, and as Grady's pointing out, unfortunately, it's not done enough. It's certainly not enough yet, but is for us to become aware of our implicit biases, right? And incorporate, and in fact, in other words, go to the other side, like explicitly desire and call in more different perspectives, because they help, they help us to avoid our mistakes, if you will, like our blind spots or our, with agents, in a similar way, we are predisposed to thinking they have some, a secret goal, something they're trying to optimize, something, like, I don't know, maybe whoever created them, right? Maybe the companies that made them, maybe the ways they were trained. They weren't trained like humans. They didn't have a shared childhood. They don't, there's not that sort of ontological, well, I say ontological, we kind of perceive it as, we actually were there, right? We really did have a childhood. We're not just like, minds only. We have lived a life, and the agents obviously haven't, or at least we don't think they have. And so, there's a little bit of an obstacle to building trust. Others will say the opposite. Others will say, oh, I trust them more because they have, no skin in the game. They have no reason to lie to me, So all I'm saying is that I'm open to the possibilities. I like the diverse perspectives. I like the fact that they're, we're creating a community, a society of minds, like in the Minskian sense. We have in the minds, some of them might be artificial, but we almost like shouldn't take any one of those perspectives too seriously as infallible, as being the right, and learn to value the interaction itself and the way it changes us, by the fact that we are exposing ourselves to it and we are recognized. So it'd be nice if some of these agents reflected back to us like a good interlocutor would do and say, you were saying another thing an hour ago, and now you're saying, in other words, that theory of mind that Jarek was mentioning earlier, for it to become an emergent and evolving process, not just something that's pre-coded and is entirely internal, but that it actually, the ability that humans have to shift through layers of metacognition and live in some sort of shared semantic space, like trying to say, okay, what did Bartek intend initially, and how has his intention changed as a result of interacting with me? And, how does it connect with what Grady was just talking about? Or, so that the ability to do that, I think is there, could be there, potentially with enough kind of, if we value the social, meaning the network aspect of it, as opposed to the individual agents, so that we're starting to see something emerging among the agents, and the agents are trying to model what it is that is emerging through their interactions.
I think the platform that the model for AI moral decision presents is a quantum leap beyond just appreciating the plurality of different points of view and their logical possibility. I mean, it's obviously there. I don't think that's unimportant to have much encounters with that, and you just see how multiform your thoughts and your values and your sense of what's good and bad can be. But what is ultimately promising in my imagination is that the platform can present to the conversants a way by which one makes discerning judgments about them. The common ground that we're looking for is a mathematical ground. It is one that says that the substantive meaning of what you think is and what you think ought to be can be cast and conceived as a complex set of relationships about which there are procedures and standards for reaching conclusions about it. So that the platform does exactly what you're saying, Ted, and the horizon of it, the potential down the road that can help us really get our heads and our hands around the deep divide amongst human beings is the engagement with that meta level, meta reasoning, understanding the mathematical processes by which people make decisions about complex variables and realities and so forth. I think the long-term future for the health of our society really rests in public education, developing a meta-literacy, an ability for people to think about thinking And the way our group understands compassionate mathematics, that is a groundwork in the beginning for doing that, because you're helping people lose the fear of math as just computation that's complex and it's something you can't do, to making it something accessible and relevant that can help us deal with human problems at their very root and actually at their very height. Because to say that you're going to resolve polarized differences within society and that there is a common ground at some point, that's very arguable. And what I'm saying is math provides a demonstrable way of showing where that common ground exists.
Always there, ready to give a thumbs up to math as a force for good. I love that, Grady. Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if Irfan, you have something to say. You've been taking notes. I know you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I have, I guess, a lot of ill-formed thoughts, but maybe I'll try to re-emphasize what you said earlier, Ted, that no one agent's output should be taken as the truth. I don't think you said it that way, but I mean, just like we ourselves sometimes, I wrote this in the chat, we ourselves may not even know what's good for us. How can we trust an agent to know what's good for us, right? But it's really good. Now I'm saying good at a societal level, not at an individual level. It's really good that we can have more ethical dialogues in society because of all of this technology. Like I have always said this, and not everyone believes it, but I actually believe that we really should be teaching philosophy in schools, starting from grade school. Why is it that philosophy education is only accessible to a tiny fragment of college students who choose to take it, when it's really fundamental for our existence? So we should be not training, we should be, talking about how, to some extent, it is our duty to learn what ethics means and how to be ethical. Now we can disagree on what that means to each of us, but unless we have a dialogue about that, we cannot reach a shared ground. And so I welcome the dialogue that such models can bring to society, but really we should have had such dialogues for a long time. So okay, let's capitalize on the technology to create such dialogue, but we really should be focusing more on the dialogues and more on the human society, not so much on the AI society. Because I know, Ted, you mentioned a society of agents at one point. That's there for our benefit, and we should always keep that in mind, I think.
Could I
Yes.
comment on that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Irfan, because you brings me also a very important thing, because me as an academic philosopher and with mathematics as a background, I've got a dream that philosophy would be as a regular subject in at least let's say secondary schools at Poland, and I've done a lot of things, let's say, for many years to fulfill my dream, and of course that wasn't possible. But in some schools still we've got philosophy. And why I am so enthusiastic for those agents, AI agents? Why? Because what was difficult? What was the main difficulty? One of the main difficulty to introduce philosophy to secondary schools at the how to say, at really broad level, not to 5 schools, but to every school, maybe even maybe not only in the big cities, but also in small cities and small towns. And the question was, who should teach philosophy? And of course, that is an administrative question. I'm a very open person, which means that if someone is thinking philosophically, could teach, philosophy, Socrates hasn't got any diploma or something like that. But from the administrative level, still, this is a serious question. Yes, because it's a public space, and someone should be responsible, and etc. And for example, in Poland at now, we've got a big discussion and a big bill, real bill, and law regulations in psychology. Who could be a psychologist in Poland? And now we've got clear regulations, and those regulations are important because of the social responsibility. But how many philosophers we've got? No, and not so many. We've got no human beings who could teach philosophy. Some of the teachers, they are interested in philosophy, but some not. Like with mathematics. Yes, it's the same somehow. But philosophy is not so popular somehow. The analogy is maybe not correct, but. That was the question: who could teach philosophy? And at now, somehow, I've got the answer. Of course, there is no possibility to have 10,000 philosophers in 2 years who could teach philosophy, but we could use AI agents who could simulate, for example, Socrates at now, even for free, even if you don't need to pay for that, really in a very, very high level. I agree with Jarek that those models at now, I'm using these models as an academic philosopher for my everyday work, because they could be used for that reasons. But unfortunately, we need to know how to use them. And it is not so. One could say that with GPT you could discuss. No. Unfortunately, the way how we use them is is really important. But still, there is a possibility to introduce kind of a philosophical thinking. For example, I could give you a meta query or meta question. Please behave like a Socrates, which means that ask some questions and etc. And then you've got, even with that definition, you've got something which we call agent, and then this agent could discuss with everyone somehow using your mobile. And everyone has a mobile, almost everyone. That's why the scale is amazing. That was not possible before. I wanted to also I wanted to say one thing, say on personal level. When I'm using LLMs, especially agents, that I upload, for example, them some, for example, Ingardenian books and papers, and I've got Roman Ingarden agent. And then what is my main, let's say, way of using them? It is I'm not asking the question and it answers me. No, I'm giving my products and I ask to Ingarden, for example, virtual, let's say Ingarden, to be critical on my products. And we start the discussion and we are arguing. I'm arguing all the time with them, and they are really much better sometimes, sometimes even if than my colleagues who are not interested, for example, in Ingarden and don't want to discuss with me the Ingardenian, let's say, ontology and the content, and that's why I'm very enthusiastic. We've been in Athens with Jarek 1 year ago, and even this paper was based on that paper that we delivered in Athens. And we met one philosopher who is from Germany, and he is working with ancient philosophy, and he defined with five steps. I do not remember at now all of the steps, but he defined what does it mean to, let's say, Socratic dialogue. Yes, with those steps, very clearly we've got the definition, and then with this definition, I started. I just gave this definition to GPT and said, "Please be my Socrates." And then I started to discuss, and that was amazing. That was truly amazing, and that was my dream. If, for example, my son, as a student in in the school, could discuss with someone that could have that kind of a conversation with someone, that critical conversation. Sorry, maybe I used too many words, but that was my reaction to Irfan thoughts. Thanks for that, Irfan.
Well, thank you, Bartek. No, that was both the interest in the teaching of it and the personal anecdote. I think it was very powerful, and I mean, it's a great note on which to end. I mean, I think that as long, my caution again is, and I'm sure we all agree on this, that as long as we don't construe the teaching as basically revealing of some truth, that there's a validity, that there's an agent that knows best, like the teacher, for example. If the agent is going to be the teacher, I don't want I don't want me as the teacher to be thought of as the purveyor of truth. I'm perhaps a more useful interlocutor, as you say, and perhaps because I have depth of knowledge and I have interest and perseverance, let's say. So I'm demonstrating the skills and practices of what I perceive to be a good life. So perhaps they're by interacting with me, my students are getting some of that. And I think the agents can have the potential perhaps to be the same way. So the problem isn't with the agents. The problem is with how we see the agents. If we see them as oracles of truth,
of course,
it's the same problem as seeing our teachers as oracles of truth, So
totally agree.
Thank you. This was very interesting. I loved how discursive it became in proper Platonic, style. So
yeah.
I appreciate it. I would love.
We've been talking about Aristotle, but I am a really Platonic philosopher.
I know you are. Yeah, exactly. I would love to have your slides. I also want very much to explore some of the mentions, for example, that Jarek made to some of the papers and the environments for trying these things out. I'm a bit of a, I mean, we have conversations like this with Irfan, with our group more broadly, about in mathematics, how you can do the kind of thing that you were talking about, Bartek, but in mathematics, for research in mathematics. However, there's a problem there. In mathematics, as you know, often people think that we're looking for the truth, the right answer, right? And so, in other words, we're almost bringing in that baggage with us. Whereas, presumably, when you're interacting with your simulator of Socrates, you're not trying to find something that they know that they're going to tell you about the real Socrates that knew because he was wise or whatever. But you want an interesting interlocutor so you can find things about, as Aristotle would say, things that you already know but have forgotten, and they're going to come back, through the interaction. So you want more interaction. And I think if we saw that in our agent, in the way we interact with agents in mathematics, I think that would be a very more useful as collaborators, as both kind of not knowing but seeking to co-create something. And I think that's more.
Sometimes I call them sparring partners.
Sparring partner, yeah.
But I'm sorry, I will just add something to this, right? Based on the experience of, once again, the personal experience and my students' experience, and this will be exactly what we expected from the agents. We are using them, I would say, to find out the gaps in the proofs of the theorems, right? So if, for example, if we are doing some argumentation theory, right, and we have some guesses, right, and we are not sure whether the that's true or not. So I'm using agents to find out counterexample, right, for this. And it takes them, it's not so easy that we'll just prompt them as Bartek mentioned, that be Socrates or whatever. You need to prepare them more, I would say, to give them more theory as kind of material context, I would say, for this. But they are very efficient with this. My students love that, right? So it's kind of the actor character critic approach, right? So you are putting the agent as a critic, and please find out the gaps, I would say, or counterexample, I would say, in my thought or in my assumption, whether this, should I spend my time, I would say, try to find out the proof, or you will find out counterexample, so forget. I should look for another theorem or lemma or whatever, or corollary, right? So we are using that, right? So I don't know whether you're using this, but I can advise or recommend, I would say, to try. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also
if I can comment, what is here important also is not about subsidizing the AI agent with providing me counterexamples, because providing counterexamples is a part of the mathematical skill, and it should be cultivated. But my also opinion is that what is our reaction with some counterexamples? And here is the real strong strength of the AI, that you cannot be sure that this counterexample is 100% correct, and then you need to check if it is a real counterexample. And then you need to be all the time, you need to be somehow, I would say, how to say in English, that you need to be ready, steady to checking. And this checking is a part of critical thinking. And in some sense, AI could decrease the critical thinking, and that's true because we've got a lot of research on that. What is the real consequence on students? But still, on the other side, like within Jung, is the best tool for critical thinking. To distinguish between those two counterexamples, which are correct and not correct. Yeah, that is the force, I would say, of AI.
I think it's the importance of critical thinking that should be realized by students, because oftentimes they're just looking for the answer and not for the critical thinking, and we should teach them about the importance of critical thinking. Yeah.
So, for example, if as you're reading a text, a mathematical text, the practice is you're reading it together with one, or ideally more than one, maybe two agents, and you never, like, they keep asking you about it and trying to poke holes at what the text is saying or what it might mean. Could it mean this? Could the kinds of things, the kinds of active reading practices that we want to encourage, but that the student might not be ready to entertain and engage with themselves, but they're seeing it done to them, with them. And especially when there's more than one agent, as I said, so you're not tempted to see what one agent is saying as the truth, but that you're seeing that they're different perspectives. They are disagreeing with one another, perhaps. They're shedding different light, so that it's an actual experiential kind of instantiation of the collective sense making. The fact that you're not gonna find what it means just by yourself, and you're gonna created by being pushed back by, as Jarek said, by the proposer and then the refuter and the skeptic and Well,
one of the problems which I've seen with my students is sometimes they don't understand what the agent is talking about, right? That, for example, when by accident, they'll go to the area where they are not so strong. For example, in modal logic or whatever, they are getting some explanation, Kripke words and whatever, and they have no idea what it is. And then they are lost a little bit. They don't know how to kind of explore or how to engage with the new kind of area. And this is something what we need to learn, the students. I would say what to do when they go to the island, which they completely don't know, right?
Yeah.
And this is something what was not present, I would say, in the kind of 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And now it's more and more, of course, not for every student, because not every student wants to know something more advanced, but for some of them, I was getting the very honest statement that, sorry, they don't understand, right? They need some time, I would say, to
need time.
be more engaged and to explore the new area. So the new
there
problems,
is-
I would say, from the pedagogical, I would say, perspective, I would say. How to
there is a risk,
handle
and
problems.
the risk of fantasy of being an expert, you know, after 1
Right.
hour of discussing with agents. And this is a big risk of this fantasy of being expert.
Yeah, but this is another problem, Bartłomiej. This is the problem that somebody is too enthusiastic about the, getting the very nice tools. Yeah, but for another side, I would say you have the opposite to that. When the student is going to the area, they have no idea, right? And now they are getting some answer, they have no idea if it's correct or not, right? So it can be frustrating to them also, right? That's, so we have to be ready, I would say, to cover both cases. One is what you mentioned, the over enthusiastic, I would say, assessment of their knowledge because the agent knows and they can ask agents, so it means they know, right? And for another side, I would say that they have no idea what agent is talking to them, right? Because
but I think even the other side, to some degree, I mean, there's a genuine frustration with not knowing, but there's also a sense that we can't afford not to know. There's not enough time, for example. So if we can systematically, as teachers or whatever, and create that space and say, this is the learning I want you to do. I want you to.
Right.
So in other words, it's a culture changing thing, and this is the problem with the side of feeling like too much, is because there's a culture of valuing the knowing, of valuing answers rather than questions. And unfortunately, much of our experience with AI plays into it, because AIs have been trained to give us answers as though they knew something that we don't know, right? There's a thing behind the scenes where they know things, right? But in reality, I mean, yes, to some degree, they have access to a lot of information, right? But we could use AIs like the ways that you were talking about, not as funds of knowledge, as purveyors of facts, but as we could train them to demonstrate valuing the questions, valuing how they might be wrong, how they don't know. I had a question for myself to ask, and I never asked it, but like, can an AI ever say I don't know, but I want to find out, or something like that, the way a human would? Of course they can. We can train them to do that, but we don't train them to do that. So so in a way we can use AI to help reinforce a culture that is more conducive to learning, for example, and to inquiry.
Yeah, some models, as Anthropic is saying, that they just started to what you say. They just started to learn model to say, I don't know. Not that the model cannot answer, but they want to save money, right? So sometimes they don't want money to be engaged, I would say, too much in looking for for very difficult questions, because sometimes we are giving them unsolvable problems from math, and these models are solving, and especially when somebody has a high, I would say, the super premium, I would say, access or membership, right? So they want to put the button on top of this, right? So just to say, I don't know. Or in another case that the model has no, for example, access to the internet or to whatever in this case, no hallucination, rather than just no. And yeah, so they just started to think about that, and then they claim some of the models started to do this. I don't know, I don't remember the name, but I think it will come. It will come.
Well, yeah. I was just gonna end by. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you the question?
Sure.
Because probably that is the fact in Poland here. That is the fact that the students, for example, in high schools, in secondary schools, they are using LLMs as problem solvers. For example, my daughter, when she is thinking about some mathematical problem, then she's tempted all the time to ask GPT. Yeah, and GPT at now. He was not perfectly right, but at now probably it's very very difficult to have wrong answer. Unfortunately, it's better if he could be wrong, in my opinion. But
Right.
the question is like that. If that is the same in, for example, California, probably it's the same that
It
the
is absolutely.
students, are using on a regular basis. And then, do you see some kind of application of this idea of malevolent agents in using of AI? Your students using of AI within math, this is out of the place and there is no
No,
room
it
for
is
that.
very much in the place. In fact, in our last department meeting, the math department, before we broke off for the summer about a week ago, we were discussing collaborating on a research project with a group at Berkeley who are proposing something of the kind, as far as I can tell. There was another, a colleague of mine who's spearheading the effort. But I suspect that they'll get some grant over the summer to prepare that for classes in the fall. And I'm co-teaching with him calculus, multivariable calculus, and we want to maybe try that out there. And this program, it basically on the one hand uses Lean as the back end to do the, the sort of the reasoning instantiation. And on top of it, they use an LLM trained to kind of interact with the, to create, well, so I mean, they don't have this conception of malevolent versus benevolent, this distinction. At least I don't think they do. I don't know enough about it. But in terms of as an agent that prods the student along, have you considered this? I mean, at least in demos that I've seen, like, how about, what do you think? Like pointing out what are the gaps in your reasoning, like Garrick was saying, what steps of your reasoning have, like, for example, from the Lean background, have not been established yet, that kind of thing, to help you orient yourself. I personally like the discursive aspect of it, of the multiplicity of agents that might be like a little bit like an ideal classroom, how in proofs and refutations, how you have like the classroom of these students who are proposing conjectures and pushing back each other and creating counterexamples. So, you can almost instantiate such a society of learners. But I wanted to point this out. You're almost like proposing philosophical agents, philosophical AI. And I want to say that, philosophy in Greek obviously is the love of wisdom, right? And if wisdom is as distinct to knowledge, basically teaching us the value of what we don't know, then it's important to love what we don't know. And I think if we train agents to appreciate what they don't know, not in giving up, just like humans, we don't give up when we don't know. It's actually an attractive thing. It is something we want to strive for. Yeah. So it's not in the things that we possess that we already know, that we are certain about, but it's in the things we're not certain about that most of the value lies, as far as philosophy is concerned. So if we're trying to create philosophical agents, we have to find ways to train them to look for the things they don't know, not only double down on the things they know.
Yeah, well, totally right. Yeah.
Well, thank you,
but the idea of these malevolent agents is especially for that, and is about the how to say, is about the making a framework for the limitations. Yes, and that is the idea which is behind. That's why if the knowledge is a cycle, then something what we do not know is the plane, yes, and
The outside, yes, the
malevolent,
outside.
yeah,
In the
outside,
Persian way, right? The
yeah.
whole plane, yes,
And
exactly.
malevolent is pushing from the inside to outside somehow.
Yeah.
The boundary, yeah, pushing the boundary.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This has been very enjoyable. Have
Yeah.
a good evening.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
and have a good day.
Yeah, that's right. It's early here still.